Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a submission by Thomas, lunging the horse Evento. Now, Evento we've seen once before with Elizabeth, Thomas's wife, lunging the horse, and we'll see if we see much difference. Now, we're going to take a look at his feet. They said he's been a little sore in his feet, and I can certainly understand why. The shoes seem very set back over underneath the toes there a little bit more than I would like to see them. Obviously, his feet are rather broken up. They certainly look like feet that could be rather sore. The shape of them is rather misshapen. It looks like your shoer has rolled the toes up, which is something that I really hate to see being done to horses. Like the toes off the ground, and there really shouldn't be. And of course, back behind, there isn't a whole lot of foot there. Now, my suggestion is that I would shoe the horse all the way around. It wouldn't surprise me if this horse got sore on his heels a little bit, as low as those heels are to the ground there. And it just doesn't have a lot of hoof there. So a shoe would help them out. You know, every couple of years this goes through California, everybody starts taking their shoes off the horses thinking that they're going to ride them barefoot. And about every 5 or 6 years this sweeps through the horse industry. And really, if you're really working horses, unless you have some super amazing arena, you really just can't work them hard without shoes, without the feet wearing down. But we can see this horse has very little muscle across his top line. Though actually these clips look better than some of the first pictures that I saw of the horse. And you can see that there's really no muscle there. You can see how sort of, as I say, tented the hips are. The hips kind of come to a point, which means the horse has been moving in a very shallow movement behind and not working the full range of his muscles. And we can also see there in front of the withers how the neck kind of dips down. That's just lack of development all through here. And now the back isn't too far down. In fact, I think this looks better than the older picture that I saw of the horse. But obviously you've got a ways to go here. You can see there's nothing really across the top of the neck. So I would really keep track of those feet and you know, do the best you can with that. I don't know what you got for a shoer there, but I said I really didn't like the way those toes seem to be rolled upwards on the toe. Some things there that I wouldn't like to see done to my horses. I like to see a nice, you know, shaped round foot that comes down to the ground and flat. And you know, whenever you see shoers pulling shoes back underneath the horse's toes, they're trying to keep the horse from tripping. Now, the problem with that is we have a video on this called The Mystery of the Breakover. And the problem is that the further you bring the shoe back under the foot, the more it makes the horse move from the knee rather than swing from the shoulder. It can unbalance the horse dramatically and actually keep them from being able to come through behind. So I'd keep having your shoer address that, or you know, perhaps if you have a master farrier in your area, you know, get some advice to see if you can't do better for him than that. And I would definitely try to shoe him behind if you can, as his heels were awfully close to the ground there. So you know, he could be a little footsore all the way around. However, this walk looks good, and since the last time I saw the video of him lunging, this already looks better. His walk alone looks better. His neck is more stretched down. He's not nearly as hollow as he was in the last one. Now you can also see, as you talked about in your letter, you know, that this horse his belly has become distended and he's kind of lost his back, and that's what you're working on, and that's why you've gone back to the lunging. That is exactly what you should do. Now I want to compliment you once again, Thomas, on the last video that you sent in. That was just exemplary work, and you're doing very well work with here on the lunge line as well. So if you haven't gone back and look at all the great comments that are on your other video of you riding, that was really well done. It was just about a perfect ride for that horse. So well done. Now, same thing here. You can see, as you talked about in your video, how this horse wants to kind of pull to the outside a little bit. That's very normal till they start working over their backs more. Remember, a horse can't bend laterally till it can bend longitudinally. That is, the back must come up before the horse can actually bend. That's why we often talk about a horse having a stiff side and a collapsed side. You know, usually the side they're not so stiff on, they collapse in on, and the other side they pull to the outside all the way. But all of that, happily, is solved by doing the work correctly, getting the horse developing over the back. When the horse begins to lift its back, then that is what frees the spine. Just like yourself, if you arch your back very extremely and see if you can bend from side to side, you'll find it very difficult. Well, the same is true for the horse. So it must lift its back up before you worry about whether or not it's bending one way or another. You know, some of them may have to be a little outside, hold their heads a little outside for a while before they get strong enough to be able to bend. So never try to force the bend. You know, when you see people lunging and they're putting the lunge line through a stirrup, you know, or through a surcingle and bending the horse's neck way around. Remember the cardinal rule of correct dressage, and that is you never bend the neck more than the middle of the spine. When we talk about bend, it's this middle of the back we're talking about, not the neck. Any horse can easily bend its neck from side to side, or most of them can, but that's not the bend we're talking about. So. But this already looks so much better compared to the last video that you sent of this horse lunging. Already there's more thrust off the ground. That is, he's actually, I can see him like pushing up through the ground. His legs, his hind legs are not left behind so much. So this is absolutely wonderful. Huge improvement over the last time. And what you should see as time goes on here, that belly should start to come up. So that's how you know the horse is really starting to work to the back and start to lift, when you see it really start to engage the abdominal muscles and the abdominal core. It's not just that we want the horse to lift its back, we want it to engage its entire core, just like a person doing Pilates. You have to hold your stomach muscles up and in order to keep your back from hurting. Well, that's very true of the horse as well. So this is really good. It's a much better rhythm than I saw in the last video of this horse. He's already swinging much more actively. There's more movement in the horse's hock. That is, the hock is making a rounder circle. And that's no big deal. He just skips into a canter there once in a while. But this is much, much more fluid and forward moving, than it was in the first video that I saw of this horse. So huge improvement here in just this short period of time that you've been doing this. And this was just the right thing to do. When horses whose backs have been destroyed, you simply have to get off of them. And it's as simple as that. There's nothing else you can do. And you'll save yourself a lot of wear and tear on yourself and the horse and all the rest of it by just going back to the beginning and starting all over again. And just, I just think of these older horses, or horses that have been trained as just like any other young horses or babies that I just go back and start all over again and fill in the gaps in the horse's training. There really is no other way around that. And that's what you're doing here, and you're doing a wonderful job of it. The shambone is working really well for this horse. It's really just right. And I love how the shambone, especially a lot of horses, and we see a lot of the Spanish horses, a lot of horses everywhere today have been broken over in the third vertebrae in the neck. And often for those, the shambone is definitely the choice as, a horse that's already been broken at the third vertebrae, that is overflexed in the third or fourth vertebrae in the neck, which causes the neck to have what appears to be a crink in it. And we get them to stretch, and those horses are almost all immediately behind the bit. But this is really good. He's stretching out forward and down and not just curling back. And he's just moving so much better. Go back and compare this to his first submission on the lunge line, and he had almost no spring in his trot at all. The legs were out behind his body most of the time. So this actually has a bit of a float to it, as I say, he's starting to get his springs on, as I like to say. So that's really good. This is a huge improvement over the first one that we saw, and you're doing this just right. That's about the right pace for him, just about like that, and it's a big improvement over the last time. So that is really, really good. So just keep trying to bring him in a little bit, but without ever trying to force the bend. Just remembering that we can never force a horse to bend. If we do, the only bend you can force is in the neck. And of course, when you force the neck to bend, you create all kinds of other problems, which is what we see riders doing all over the world today. And, and they're so frustrated with what they're doing and frustrated with their horses, and they see them going downhill. We see so many beautiful horses brought over here from Europe that have been trained relatively well, and they get in the hands of trainers who don't actually train horses but only understand cues. You got to understand that there's giving horses cues, and then there's real training, which is the physical development of the horse. So sadly, so many trainers today, they know what the cues are for the movements, but they have no clue as to how to develop a horse physically, to make those movements easy for the horse, so the horse can do them in the best possible way. So we end up with so many horses today, even big, very beautiful mover ones, ones that are incredible movers, and that's why they get by, because they're these $1 million movers, and even though they're shortened and broken in the neck and all the rest of this, it looks very fancy to somebody who doesn't know what dressage actually is, which is too sadly today, too many of the judges. We must encourage all of our national sport registries, the USDF and the FEI, to get back to some kind of semblance of classical work in the training and stop allowing all of these things. I encourage everyone who watches these videos, to write into the USDF, write to the FEI, and demand that things like the roll curve be outlawed. And we're making progress. It is improving, and now we have Charlotte Desjardins to look to, who is winning and beating horses that are roll curved and upside down and these sort of things enforced against the hand. It's just too bad that the judges, listen to this judges, that you all don't wake up, because you're ruining the sport. Because when you give somebody an 80% on a horse that's hollow, it goes home and that person trains another 10 horses and another 10 people to ride in that same way. And therefore we've seen dressage, kind of begin to degrade into something more like saddle seat riding or Tennessee walkers, where it's all just about this flashy front leg movement, which of course anybody who understands what dressage really is, that is the progressive gymnastic development of the horse's physical and mental attitudes through correct work, that encourages the horse like a person, to move with the correct posture, so to speak, so that they don't get damaged in the movement in the sport. That's the whole thing. Anybody can get a flash in the pan, but what I tell people all the time is look behind the ribbons. When you see so many of these people who people think are these incredible riders because they can afford $1 million horses, but then every time we see them, and 2 years later, they're on another $1 million horse because they burnt that one out. So people need to start looking behind the ribbons, get involved with these organizations, before dressage is lost, into the horse show, miasma, which has created things like saddlebreds and Tennessee walkers and all these kind of things. We certainly don't want to see dressage go that same way. And it should be, the last bastion of good riding. And if we let that go, all of riding is going to slip. But what a great job, Thomas, you've done there lunging this horse. That was just right for him. Couldn't be happier. Just about the right pace. He was well engaged. His body looks better than the last video that I saw. He's moving much better. Once again, go back and look how he seems to be pushing off the ground a little bit. That's what we call thrust. So he's beginning to develop some thrust. So I would think that this horse would be ready to start riding a little bit. Now remember, the cardinal rule is simply, if you can't get on and stretch the horse at the walk, there's no point in going on to the trot. So when you can get the stretch in the walk, and if you can't, now of course this work you're doing here should be done before you get on. So when we're transitioning a horse from just lunging to riding, we always want, we don't want to just throw a horse into a new game, so to speak. Horses work well when they know what to expect. So this is the best thing to do, is you'd want to come in and lunge him just the way you're doing here and get everything going right, and then get on him and stretch him at the walk. And if you can stretch the walk, then you can go on to the trot. And if you can stretch the trot, you can go on to the canter. If you can stretch the canter, then you're golden, so to speak, because this is the hardest thing. Remember, everything else in riding is just learning a cue for this or that. The real art of dressage is in developing horses physically. That's what the real art of dressage is. It's not, can you put your leg here, can you put your leg there, to ask for this or that movement. And once again, talking about the showing, that's what we've seen. We've seen the movements degrade to where people are getting ridiculously high scores as long as the horse keeps doing something, irregardless of the horse, the piafs that we're seeing where the horses are standing on their heads, and their hips are way up in the air while they're piaffing and passaging. And passage, the hind legs are out behind them as they're dragging their legs around. That's not even a passage to somebody who actually understands what it actually is. So this foundational work is the hardest thing to learn. But it's also it's much simpler than learning to ride incorrectly. When you learn to ride incorrectly, nothing works right. So I see so many confused riders because they've been told to do this or do that, or to sit this way or that way, but none of it has any really good effect on their horse because they're working on them. So that was really, really good lunging. I'm really happy with this. This is a huge improvement over the last time. So I said I would think this horse is ready to ride. I'd bring him to the stage you just had him to there, and then I would start getting on him. As I said, let the back be your guide in training. And once you understand that, it takes all of the frustration out of training horses, because if you can't get the back up, there's no point in trying to bring the head up. So you leave the horse where it is, and gradually you slowly bring the head and neck up, much as you did in the other video that I saw of you riding, which was a wonderful job, Thomas, once again. Everyone who hasn't seen that should certainly go and see and watch the previous video with Thomas riding. He does a wonderful job with the horse there. For an amateur rider, I would have thought that was a better ride than I see most professionals doing. So very, very well done, and I hope you're helping others in your area to understand this work now that you guys have it. And once again, good trot here. So much more active. He's got so much more flexion. Once again, you see how he's got a little bounce in his step. If you go back and look at the previous video that you showed me, there was no bounce in his step at all. Now, as we're going on here, we can also see that his belly is starting to take shape there. That is, he's starting to pull up the abdominal wall there. See how different that looks now? We're starting to see a little bit of a line form along the rib cage, just like a person, with well-formed abs. To see them stand up, you can see the edge of the rib cage there. Well, a horse should be exactly the same way. So this is already coming up really nicely. So that tells me he is engaging his back. A horse that's back is just totally collapsed will never pull that up. It will just hang down there unless you don't give him any water for a week or something, like they do at the racetrack, and then make them run dry. They will pull up that way. But this is happening from the right reason, which is correct exercise. Really great work. So yes, in your next video of this one, I'd love to see you, once again, you don't have to bother to show me the lunging, but you should lunge this horse every day still before you get on him. Now, as you said, he was a little sore in his feet, but it seems like you've got that fairly cleared up anyway. I mean, I'm not seeing any soreness here. That may have had something to do with, when horses get really sore in their feet. And, something else that I want to point out, I don't know what's happening with this one, but one of the big problems we have here in the States is people turning horses out and running them like lunatics till they pull their shoes off. And there are barns here in California that every dressage horse is turned out and run like a lunatic every day before the people get on them. And of course, every other day they pull a shoe off, and then they take off half the shoe with it. And that's another thing for those interested in how shoeing. I have my farriers put very small clinches on my horses, because if it pulls a shoe off, I want the shoe to come off, not the foot. I really don't care if a horse pulls a shoe once in a while. If the nails, if the clinches are very small, the shoe will just pull right out without taking half the foot off with it. So that this is really good. Once again, even see how much deeper this horse is even going now. Once again, look how its belly is really pulling up. So I think this horse is ready to ride. And maybe you said the horse had become nervous and these sort of things. I'm sure that was the problem. His back had dropped, and he was probably foot sore as well on top of that. And I would think about shoeing the back feet if I were you, if you feel like he's getting along with it okay. But if you really put horses to work, I thought those heels were awfully close to the ground there in those photographs that you showed me. And, that alone can make a horse not want to work, and can really sore them up. So. But if your farrier is going over and you guys feel like it's okay and he's not getting, foot sore, but you definitely want to put some hoof testers on there every now and then and just see, if it really seems to be like you're wearing the horse's foot right down to the heels, then you want to get some shoes on back there. I've seen many, many horses that were a lot of trouble for people that were trying to ride them barefoot be totally turned around by putting some shoes on. It's like anything else. If the horse hurts, if I tell you to go out and run on a bunch of pebbles, you're not going to get very far. Well, the horse is exactly the same way. So he's not going to want to work. We're never going to get good work out of a horse that's in pain anywhere. So that's what we got to do, is get them. Someone commented to me yesterday, your horses never seem to resist. Well, they don't resist because I'm not working them in a way that's painful for them. I'm showing them a way that's comfortable, and I'm being sure that their feet are comfortable and that all of those things, that the saddle fit is perfect on the horses and these sort of things. So there's nothing adding to that. But this canter is good too here. This is really nice. He's getting over his back quite nicely, so that means you can canter to some advantage, and that's a good thing. Now, if the horse's head were straight up in the air and he was just hollow, then you wouldn't want to canter. Remember, the canter we always improve in the trot, because if the horse has a bad canter, doing more canter will only make the horse sore in the back. But this is really good now. And once again, really nice big swinging action there in the hind legs. I've hardly seen the horse fall out behind at all in this workout today, as opposed to the last one that we saw when hind legs were kind of falling out behind him quite often. This is really good. And just slowly but surely, as we're even seeing here, he's counter bending less as you're going. And it's really good rhythm. See how the deeper he goes, the rounder the hocks work. And that's the big thing for everybody at home. Start watching the back ends of your horse. The problem with most people riding today is they don't even look at the back. They're clueless. I mean, I go to shows and see dead lame horses all the time. That the people, if you walked up to them and talked to them, they're completely clueless that the horse is dead lame. Now, often those lamenesses are bridle lamenesses. What we call a bridle lameness is something that's caused by the rider being out of balance, or a bad fitting saddle, or a rider usually trying to force the horse onto the bridle when its back is down. Because remember, if the horse's back is not up, you can't get it on the bit. That's why we end up with all of these broken in the neck horses where they've been forced over in the neck, and since they can't really make the right connection, all that can happen is, with enough force, is you separate the vertebrae in the neck, and people think the horse is given. Well, the horse hasn't given at all. It's broken, and now it's behind the contact, and those are the hardest things to correct. As I say all the time, when I go out to look for horses for someone to buy, the first thing I look is whether the horse is broken at the third vertebrae. And unless it's some phenomenal horse that's some great deal for somebody that's willing to go through the what it takes, which is about a year to just correct that alone, I say no, and you should too. And if the sellers would become more of this, and some of the European sale barns and stuff are just the worst at this, because they're selling, unfortunately, they're trying to sell dressage horses to people who really don't understand dressage to start with, so they think they have to make them all look like they're Grand Prix in order to sell them. We need to educate the public to realize what a 4-year-old is supposed to look like. A 4-year-old is not supposed to look like a Grand Prix horse with its neck way up in the air and it's and all pulled over and on the bridle, so to speak. We must give them time to develop, and if we don't, we shorten the life, which is why we see so many horses being retired today at such a ridiculously early age. And once again, those little bobbles that he does there, no big deal. It's just really, really good work. So as I said, I think this horse is ready to be ridden. I like how his belly is pulling up there, especially that's what really shows me. I almost never get on a horse until I see that, not that with a baby we put somebody up on him and walk him around a little bit, but until I see that belly starting to come up the way I'm seeing here, I would never put a rider to do anything more than just walk around, for instance, with a young horse a little bit. But I'm seeing all the right stuff happening here. I mean, look at the difference in how his belly looks from here and how you started, and even his hips are looking rounder. It should look like a big apple, not like a triangle up on top of those hips, which is what it kind of looks there standing still. But if you keep doing this work, it's going to change dramatically. And once again, we saw him standing still, we could see there really was nothing on the top of his neck. All the muscling was underneath. But you're doing a great job of correcting him. I mean, the difference in the movement in this video compared to the last one that I saw is at least 100%, better than what I saw in the one just a couple of months ago. So really, really good work here, and you're doing just the right thing when you see him slow down. You're sending him on. That's exactly what you want to do. You push the envelope a little bit. So in your next video, you should definitely, I'd like to see you riding this horse. And once again, same thing. You don't need to show me the lunging part of it, but do the lunging part of it for quite some time. And, maybe not ride him every day. That's what I do with these horses at this level. If their backs don't feel good, I don't ride them. And I lunge them for a while till they feel good, then I get on. As long as the horse can support me in the walk, I can go on and work. But if you can't even get that in the walk, and all you're getting is a hollow horse kind of, dragging itself along at a walk at a slow pace, that's never going to do the horse any good. Nor is it going to do you any good. And unfortunately, that's part of the problem with education all around the world today, is that people grow up riding hollow horses and people telling them that that's the way they should go. And, we've got 2 generations or 3 generations now of people, who've grown up on hollow-backed horses thinking this is the way you ride. I mean, it's epidemic when you go and see the jumper people these days, with few exceptions, especially here in the United States, because the horses jump so well. So, that's almost the sad thing, because the horses have become so good that they're being burnt out because they do it so easily. I grew up, in America riding thoroughbreds. That's all we had. And getting a thoroughbred over a 1-foot fence sometimes could, could take a year of training. As opposed to the warm bloods that we now have bred that have been bred to jump very naturally. I mean, a lot of them these days you can't even put out in the pasture because they'll jump over anything you put them in front of. They're that smart about it, and they do it so naturally. But unfortunately, for the horses, because they have all that talent, they're getting used up by people who really don't know how to ride, and trainers who really don't care, who really just want to sell you another horse. Once again, that's the sad thing. If you're having to buy another horse every 2 years, well, it kind of behooves your trainer, So I tell people all the time, beware of trainers who are constantly telling you need to buy another horse. I have 2 right now with me that, were picked out for people that they thought were going to be their dream horses, and and they could ride them when they bought them, but after 2 months with their trainer, they can't even get on their backs, and then they've broken them in the neck and done all these things, and now they're telling them, after picking them out for them, that they needed to buy another one. Well, happily they came to us, and we are solving that problem for them. But this story is just too epidemic in the horse business these days. Trainers have too many horses to train correctly. I think a great trainer can do a good job on maybe 10 horses a day. If there was a time when I rode 20 a day, but that was in my youth, and I worked from 6 o'clock in the morning until midnight sometimes, and that took a toll on me as well. It took a toll on me more than the horses. But that's what we want to think about all the time, the longevity. It takes 5 years just to get a horse so they're really a joy to ride. So if they burn out in 6, then you haven't done much. and for yourself. You just spend a lot of money for nothing. So get them working right, and they'll last a long time, as you guys are doing with this one. So Thomas, great job with this horse again, lunging just like you did riding the other one. I just couldn't be happier. Once again, I hope you're being an influence on some of your compatriots there in Belgium and people around the world that certainly responded to your last ride. If you haven't seen the comments on that, I would highly recommend that you go and do so. And keep up the good work, because you guys are doing a great job. We need people like you all over the world that people can look to and go see it being done, because that's the problem. I was fortunate enough to grow up with a father who was a horse trainer before World War II, and so I got the good stuff early on. And then I was confused when I went into the show world later on. Great work today. See you next time. Big improvement in this horse. Thomas, wonderful job. You have a really nice feel for the horses. Keep it up.